In the beginning, there was just a vast emptiness known as Ginnungagap, which separated the kingdom of fire of Muspelheim from Niflheim, the icy land of mist. The icy mist of Niflheim continued to fill the void of Ginnungagap and formed a large ice block. When the temperature in Muspelheim began to increase, the heat emanated from the kingdom of fire started to melt the great icy stone. Inside of the ice, Ymir began to emerge, a primitive divinity who was hibernating inside the ice. Already defrosted, Ymir continued to sleep, but the heat of Muspelheim made the colossal creature sweat, and the first living beings sprouted from this perspiration. Ymir was not the only one who emerged from the ice melting. A large cow named Audombla also emerged, and from its tits flowed 4 rivers that fed Ymir. The cow fed itself by licking a block of salty ice, and from the eaten ice a new creature emerged. This was Buri, the progenitor of the gods, giving rise to Jotnar. Buri coupled with the giantess, and they both generated Bor, who in turn, with the giantess Bestla, brought to Odin, Vili, and Ve to the world. Odin and his brothers lived frustrated in the emptiness of Ginnungagap. The sky and the earth were not a reality yet, nor the sea and the forest. The brothers decided that something would have to be done, and only after Ymir's death, they were able to start the world as we know it. Odin, Vili, and Ve attacked and killed the giant Ymir. The oceans were born from the spilled blood. Firm land emerged from Ymir's flesh, and his large bones were piled up, giving rise to the chains of mountains. Ymir's flesh had small larvae, which originated dwarves who would live under the earth, and the noble elves who had their dwelling in Alfheim. After having shaped Midgard, the gods thought it could not remain an uninhabited kingdom, and, seeing 2 trunks on the edge of the ocean, decided that this material would create mankind. A man called Ask and a woman called Embla were molded. Odin gave them life, Villa intelligence, and Ve carved their eyes, ears, and mouth, and so the men could hear, see, and speak. All human beings are descendants of this first couple, and for having given life to the first couple, Odin is known as the father of all. Finally, the brothers created the kingdom of Asgard, which would become the dwelling of the gods. This kingdom was separated from the others, connected only by the Bifrost Bridge. And so the reign of the gods over the world began.
Odin reigned from high above, in his throne in Asgard, but, despite being quite a sagacious god, he was aware that he didn't know everything, and so he began a quest for wisdom. He disguised himself as a wanderer and started to roam in Jotunheim, the land of the giants, enemies of the gods. Mimir lived in this kingdom, a quite ancient deity who was Odin's uncle. There, he lived next to the Well of Knowledge. The waters of this well fed Yggdrasil, the Tree of the Worlds. Mimir, using the horn of Galahorn, drank the bled water, and so his knowledge about the world kept expanding. Odin arrived at his uncle's well and asked to drink a bit of the water of knowledge.
Mimir, I am your nephew and lord of the gods, but how can I be worthy of my title if I cannot reach true wisdom?
Being a relative of mine or lord of the gods don't give you the right to drink from my well. The price is too high.
Tell me what's the price then, because I'm willing to pay it.
The price is your eye. I want you to pluck your eye out and throw it into the well, and so you can drink from it.
Odin knew that Mimir was not someone fond of bluffing and jokes, and realized that he would need to pay a high price if he wanted to reach true wisdom. The great god didn't hesitate, and indeed, he plucked his eye out. His yell of pain was so loud that it echoed throughout the universe. Odin placed his eye inside the water of the well, and the sacrifice pleased Mimir. he offered him a horn with water of his well and asked the god to drink everything at once. After having drunk the contents of the vessel, the father of all got filled with knowledge. The place once occupied by his eye was replaced with a major scar, which sometimes emanated an intense brightness. Odin then became known as the One-Eyed, or the One of the Flaming Eye. From that day forward, Odin started to see the world with much more clarity, and now, with just one eye, he could see much better than he had with both. Sif, the goddess and wife of the mighty Thor, had beautiful and long golden hair. And from all the goddess's traits, her hair was the one that attracted the thunder god the most. But one day, Thor woke up and was faced with a bald woman in his bed and yelled,
Who are you, witch? And what have you done with my beloved Sif?
The god, stunned, recognized his wife and shouted,
Loki!
The scream was heard throughout the whole kingdom of Asgard. During the night, Loki, the god of mischief, concocted yet another of his pranks. While the goddess was sleeping, he cut her beautiful hair. The thunder god dragged Loki up to his room, where Sif cried copiously,
Look at what you have done. How did you dare to cut my wife's hair? What now? Do I have to parade with a bald wife right by my side?
Have you ever thought about the possibility of making her wear a hat? Thor lifted Loki from the floor and said,
If you do not find a way to make my Sif regain her splendor, I will break every single one of your bones.
Considering that threat, the god of mischief started to think of a way to solve that situation, until he had an idea. So he departed towards Svartalheim, the dwarf land. He was aware that the skillful dwarves were able to do anything, but before that, he would have to convince them. Then he looked for the brothers, sons of Ivaldi, who were skillful craftsmen, and said, You don't know the latest news. The gods will conduct a trial to establish who the best craftsmen are. And the brothers Brock and Eitri said that you, sons of Ivaldi, do not have the slightest chance.
That's an outrage. Those pierced, clumsy hands will not have the slightest chance against us.
Very well, but there is one condition. You have to do 3 gifts for the gods, and one of them has to be a long golden hair that never stops growing. Loki departed to incite the brothers Brock and Eitri to establish a competition. You will not believe this. The sons of Ivaldi will participate in a contest promoted by the gods to decide who the best craftsmen are, and they said you don't have any chance, given that you are nothing but a bunch of clumsy guys.
Clumsy guys? That's quite typical of the sons of Ivaldi.
But we will not compete. Everybody already knows that we are much better, so we have nothing to gain. I bet that you are not better than the legendary brothers Ivaldison. I would bet my own head on it.
The head of the most elusive of gods seems a nice prize to me. I accept the bet.
Loki trembled, but did not step back and accepted the bet. He also knew that Brock and Eitri were better than the sons of Ivaldi, but now he would have to use all of his cunning talents to untangle himself from that mess. Loki was in a stalemate to retrieve the hair of the goddess Sif. The god of mischief instigated a clash between 2 families of dwarves, and these would compete to see who the best craftsman was, and the gods of Asgard, Odin, Thor, Frey, would be the judges. To enable the clash, Loki's head was literally at stake, due to a bet made with Brock and Eitri. The dwarves, sons of Ivaldi, started to make their gifts for the gods, and Loki noticed that everything seemed to went well. But the god realized that the other pair was doing something outstanding. Loki then understood he had to intervene. Brock and Eitri had already built 2 beautiful gifts, but they were certainly crafting the greatest of all works. It was a powerful hammer. To achieve perfection, the dwarves had to keep the forge at an ideal temperature, not a degree more or less. And Brock did his work by pumping the bellows with great precision. Loki noticed he had to act quickly and turned himself into a large hematophageous mosquito. He flew to Brock and painfully stung his hand. The dwarf withstood the pain and continued his work. Then Loki attacked with an even stronger sting in his neck. The dwarf unleashed painful cries but resisted. The god then decided to attack the dwarf's eyes. He closed his eyes, and the eyelids were attacked. The agony was unbearable, and the dwarf stopped pumping the bellows. Due to the temperature change, the hammer's handle broke. Loki considered his mission accomplished and went away. The time for the great clash had arrived, and the dwarves, sons of Ivaldi, presented their gifts to the gods. The goddess Sif, wife of Thor, was gifted with new hair made of gold. Seeing the goddess with her splendor back, Loki felt some relief. Odin was gifted a beautiful and powerful spear, capable of piercing anything, and every oath made under that spear would be unbreakable. Frey was given a huge boat, which could be folded so many times to the point where it could fit into a pocket. Those were 3 impressive gifts, much to Loki's relief. The turn of Brock and Eitri had come. The latter still had puffy eyes because of the sting. He gave bracelets made of Draupnir gold to Odin, a material from which, every 8 nights, new bracelets would fall from it like drops. These could serve as honorary ornaments, or a way to increase wealth. Frey was given a huge boar with golden fur, which could be mounted. The creature could fly and never be tired, and his shine drove the darkness away. And Thor's time finally arrived, and he was given a hammer.
This is a beautiful hammer, but its handle is too short.
I understand your disappointment, but don't judge this hammer by its handle. Its name is Mjolnir. It is indestructible, and its power is almost indescribable. When thrown, it never misses its target and always comes back to its owner.
Such a marvelous piece! With this powerful hammer, no giant will be a match for me.
Odin, Thor, and Frey agreed that, from all those gifts, the Mjolnir hammer was certainly the best. Despite all the tricks, Loki's plan collapsed, and now his head was demanded as a prize.
Ha 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 ha! Now I want your head,
Brokey said, already sharpening his axe. But Loki had one last play. You can sever my head, as long as you do not damage a single piece of my neck. The agreement says that you can only have my head.
You cheater! How will I get your head without damaging the neck?
Then Odin intervened.
If people paid more attention to the words used, they would never negotiate with the cunning Loki, the trickster god.
Brokey, to punish Loki, sewed his mouth so that he would never deceive anyone again for a long time. But at least the cheater kept his head on his neck, and the gods of Asgard received magnificent artifacts.
The kingdom of Asgard had many enemies, but these dreaded the power of the mighty Thor, the champion of the gods. However, during Thor's absence, Asgard became vulnerable, and therefore the gods decided that a fortification would be necessary. Its edification would eventually take several years, but a strong traveler appeared, someone who claimed to be a great builder, willing to build the wall in record time. But, as a reward, he wanted the beautiful goddess Freya as his wife. Obviously, the gods refused such outrageous proposal, but the cunning Loki noticed that the builder's suggestion was not that bad. Think with me, my friends. He claims to be able to build this immense wall in just 1 year, and that is impossible. Let's suggest the following term. If he does not complete the wall within that time frame, he will not get anything. And, since the task is impossible, when the time is up, he will have to build a great part of the wall, and then we will just have to finish the rest, sparing great efforts. Convinced, the gods presented the proposal to the constructor, who promptly accepted the terms and started the construction. He was very strong, and piled the stones up with ease, and relied on the help of a powerful horse that brought him stones taken from distant quarries. Time was ticking, and the wall was being built quickly. The deadline was about to end, but the gods noticed that the builder was almost finishing his task. Odin was furious with Loki.
Look at what you have done. The wall is almost ready. We will almost certainly lose our beloved Freya to this man, and this is all your fault.
I said that this man could not be able to build this wall, and I will make sure he does not. Loki realized that, without the help of his powerful stallion, the manufacturer would not have the stones needed to complete the task, and readied a plan to push the great horse out of the working scene. And, using his powers of metamorphosis, Loki turned himself into a beautiful mare, with the intent to seduce the great horse. The powerful horse was fascinated by the god in disguise, and went after the mare, thirsty with desire. Loki desperately ran as fast as he could, and disappeared over the horizon with the stallion at his heels. The manufacturer, without the help of his horse, could not finish his work within the deadline and rebelled against the gods. He tore his robe, which revealed that the builder was actually a giant. Furiously, he yelled,
Damn gods of Asgard, you are simply cheaters and therefore you will meet your end.
The maddened giant launched an attack. Thor, also known as the Destroyer of Giants, fought against him and crushed his head with his hammer. The gods completed the rest of the wall, and Asgard was safe. Nevertheless, much time passed until Loki's resurgence, who had disappeared after trying to flee from the powerful Savidalari horse. And in his return, he brought with him an exotic 8-legged colt. This followed Loki wherever he was. The small colt grew and became the most powerful and fastest horse of all. Loki gifted him to Odin, with the following condition: nobody could ever ask him the origin of the majestic horse that would be known as Sleipnir.
Thor, the god of thunder, had won the mighty hammer Mjolnir as a gift, thanks to Loki's prank. With this hammer, Thor defended the kingdom of Asgard, tackling any sort of threat. But one day after waking up, Thor sensed that his hammer was missing. The god looked for Mjolnir in his room and only found a message which said, "If you want to recover your beloved hammer, visit me in my domains so that we can negotiate. You will get it back in exchange for an appropriate ransom." Signed, Thrym. Thor knew that nobody was a better negotiator than Loki, the god of mischief, and therefore he asked him to go to Thrym's meeting in the land of giants. Loki arrived at Thrym's palace in Jotunheim, and facing the giant, Loki began the negotiations.
Dear Thor, come closer, because my sight is not as good as in the past. You're now slimmer than the last time we met.
Loki noticed that the giant's sight was indeed impaired, because the differences between him and the god of thunder were enormous. After negotiating, the god returned to Asgard with Thrym's proposal and presented to the Aesir gods. The giant was willing to give back the hammer if Freya, the most beautiful of goddesses, was delivered to him as a wife. The gods considered the proposal outrageous, but without the hammer Mjolnir, Thor could not defend Asgard. That was when Loki had an unusual idea, to say the least. "Thor, I need you to wear this." It was a wedding dress.
How dare you insult me this way?
Calm down, calm down. I will explain my plan later. Loki knew that the giant's sight was as good as a mole's, and so he wanted to take Thor to Thrym's palace disguised as the goddess Freya. Thor, without another alternative, dressed as a bride and went with Loki, also disguised as a servant of goddess Freya. When they arrived in Jotunheim, the ladies were very well received.
Welcome to my palace. I prepared a banquet in honor of the beautiful goddess.
The giant would have to be deeply short-sighted, to the point of confusing the bulky god, dressed as a bride, with a beautiful maiden. Soon after taking his seat at the banquet table, Thor began to voraciously devour everything in front of him.
Wow, such a voracious appetite you have, my new wife. I have never seen a goddess as gluttonous as you are.
Then Loki said,
"I think she wants to finish the banquet as soon as possible, so that you can consummate your union."
Thor furiously looked at Loki,
who appeared to find the situation quite whimsical.
Let's do it then. Bring the hammer, and we will seal this agreement and get things settled.
One of the giant's lackeys brought the hammer and placed it in front of the bride. Thor grabbed the hammer, and so he could finally unleash all of his rage. The god of thunder smashed all the giant's lackeys with his hammer, and Thrym had his head open like a melon.
Let's go home, Loki. I can't wait to get this damn dress off of me.
Don't you know that a good widow must wear black?
With the return of Thor and his hammer Mjolnir, the kingdom of Asgard was safe again, and the gods never stopped to have fun at the Valhalla banquets, telling the story of when Thor dressed like a bride. Loki, the god of mischief, was married to Sigyn, and together they had Nari and Vali. Sleipnir, Odin's glorious eight-legged horse, was also part of Loki's offspring, and was conceived in a story that is nothing short of exquisite. Loki also had Angbodda as a lover, a beautiful Jotun, who lived in Jotunheim. Together, they would give birth to a frightening offspring. One night, Odin, the ruler of Asgard, had a premonition. The god envisioned a major battle between the Asgardians and the forces of darkness, and Loki's offspring would have a major role in that quarrel. His last vision was centered on the jaw of a massive wolf, and then his vision fell into utmost darkness. Odin gathered the gods of Asgard and forced Loki to reveal where his children were living with the giantess. The gods then left for Jotunheim, trying to catch the sons of Loki. After reaching the dwell of the giant Angbodda, the gods kidnapped Jotun's children. Loki's offspring were still quite young. One was a snake, another was a wolf cub, and there was a beautiful girl as well, but when she turned, the gods realized that the other side of her body was in every way similar to a rotting corpse. That girl was Hel, and she was certainly a daunting figure. Throughout the journey that would take the gods of Asgard home, Odin noticed that the serpent's size had doubled. What had once been a common snake was now a python. Odin noticed that the serpent kept growing, and he made the decision to throw it into the great sea that surrounded Midgard. The serpent only kept growing over the years, becoming so immense that, one day, its tail already encircled the whole world. This creature made by Loki would receive the name of Jormungandr. All the gods looked suspiciously at Hel in Asgard. Some felt frightened by her. Odin, noticing that the girl preferred the company of the dead than of the living creatures, designated her the ruler of the world of the dead. There she reigned over the souls of those who had an unworthy death and failed to reach Valhalla. In turn, the wolf cub was raised among the gods of Asgard and learned the language of the gods. His name was Fenrir. The god Tyr established a bond with the wolf, and they became friends. Like the serpent, his sister, the wolf kept growing. Soon he was bigger than a bull, and, just a short period after, he was already bulkier than any animal that walked the earth. Fenrir inherited some of the worst traits of Loki, his father, including evilness and cruelty. After discussing the subject, the gods decided that something had to be done. A wolf with so much power would be a threat to all the inhabitants of Asgard, and the gods began to plot a way to circumvent that threat. The gods Thor and Loki crossed the world in Thor's chariot, which was pulled by powerful goats. The gods had left for the kingdom of the giants, looking for taking part in new adventures. Before that, they stopped in a humble house, where the gods wanted to stay for the night. The gods were warmly welcomed by the villagers, but being poor, they had nothing to offer as food. Thor told them not to worry, because he would provide a bountiful meal. The god himself slaughtered his own goats and had their meat prepared for a meal that would honor any god. The god of thunder offered food to the dwellers who welcomed him, and then he said,
"You can eat as much as you want. I only ask you to leave the bones unscathed."
While everyone ate the delicious goat meat, Loki decided to do one of his pranks. He approached the hut's young resident, known as Tjalfi.
and he told him, "There is no fairness at all in allowing Thor to keep all the delicious marrow which fill these bones just for himself. Such a delicacy would give great strength to those who eat it." The boy now wanted to try it. He waited until everyone was asleep and broke one of the bones to taste the marrow. The bones were then thrown over the skin of the slaughtered goats. The next day, Thor did a ritual and brought the goats back to life. However, one of the goats was now limping because its leg had been broken. Thor was enraged and grabbed his powerful hammer. "You bastards! I offered you plenty of food and just got betrayal as a return. Who did this?" Loki tried to conceal his smile. Tjalfi, regretting his action, confessed the crime. "Just give me one reason why I shouldn't destroy this house, together with those who live in it."
Spare my family. They did nothing. Take me as your servant, so that I may pay my debt to the gods."
Thor was benevolent and decided to spare Tjalfi's family, and they now would have to treat his goats. While Thor, Loki, and Tjalfi departed to explore the land of the giants. Thor, Loki, and his new servant Tjalfi roamed through the inhospitable kingdom of Jotunheim, the land of the giants. The intense cold forced them to look for shelter. The gods found what appeared to be a huge cave and they went inside. The travelers tried to rest, but an immense noise trembled the earth. Thor stepped out of the cave to investigate the source and, from the top of a mountain, he noticed that a huge giant slept beside their cave, and his snoring shook the whole ground. The giant woke up, and he did not appear particularly threatful. Thor realized that the giant wore only one glove, while the other was actually the cave they were sheltered. The giant tried to pull on his glove, and Loki and Tjalfi fell from it. The huge giant introduced himself to the travelers.
"I'm Skirmir, and if you wish, I can serve as your guide, while also carrying all your luggage."
The gods accepted the offer. After all, they did not know the region that well, and having the opportunity not to carry their own goods would certainly be a great relief. Skirmir put everything inside his own bag and initiated the journey. The giant was now tired and decided to take a nap. Night came and the travelers started to feel hungry. They tried to open the sleeping giant's bag but failed. Unable to wake the giant, Thor, angered with hunger, grabbed his hammer and struck the giant's head with fierceness. After the blow, the sleepy giant said,
"A leaf must have fallen on the top of my head. Well, it was nothing anyway,"
and went back to sleep. Dawn was around the corner, and the hungry travelers waited for the giant to wake up to finally eat their breakfast. But Skirmir was still asleep. The angered Thor hammered the giant's head with all his might. Such a blow could destroy any giant's head, but Skirmir just woke up as if he had been bothered by an insect. Thor was amazed by the giant's endurance. No way a creature could withstand such a blow. After waking up, the giant said,
"Your destination is right there, where Utgaror is located, the place of my giant friends. There they call me soft and weak. I think it's now time for us to go."
Thor and his fellows went to the giant's palace. The god was a little worried. If Skirmir was the little one, what would he find in Utgaror, the domain of the king of the giants? Thor, his servant Tjalfi, and Loki were all exploring the kingdom of the giants, and they finally arrived at the enormous castle of Utgaror. The Aesir gods entered the palace and encountered the huge giants who lived there. The one who stood out the most welcomed them.
"Welcome to my palace. I'm the lord of this palace. I have always heard that you Asgardians consider yourselves to be the greatest of all. How about we take part in a dispute? I can defeat you in any kind of competition you can imagine," said Thor with confidence. "Calm down, Odin's son. The first to compete will be Loki, son of the glorious giant Loki."
Loki would face Logi, the giant's servant, to know who could eat the banquet on the table more quickly. Loki and Logi started eating all the food with incredible speed, and they both finished at the same time. Loki ate all the food, but the giant Logi ate even the bones, platters, and cutlery, so he was declared the winner. The servant Thjalfi also engaged in a race against a giant who was still a child. Thjalfi was one of the fastest men that ever lived, yet he had no chance against the hasty giant boy.
For you, mighty Thor, I pose 3 challenges. First, you should drink all the beverage in this horn at one go.
Thor grabbed the horn with confidence, as drinking a lot was one of his skills. The god drank, and drank that salty liquid until he reached his limit. But he only managed to decrease the liquid that filled the horn a little bit.
Ha ha ha! You drink like a maid. I'll make it easier for you. In this next race, you will have to lift my pet cat.
You got to be kidding me, said Thor, approaching the cat. Much to Thor's surprise, the cat was incredibly heavy. The god of thunder managed to lift the cat over his head, but it could still touch the ground with its paws.
It appears that the stories they tell about you are just legends, and you cannot lift a cat up. In your last ordeal, you must fight my foster mother.
That was when an old giantess appeared in the room. Thor felt offended for having to fight this old woman, but he decided to fight her to secure at least one win for Asgard's team. The fight began, and Thor was surprised by the old giantess's strength. The god used all his strength against the old lady, and at times, it appeared that the victory was in his hands. But the old woman managed to drop Thor to his knees. Defeated, the gods and their servant left the Utgaror palace, with their heads pointing down. The king of the giants followed the Asgardians to his kingdom's boundaries, and, when saying goodbye, he declared,
Now that we're alone, I can tell you a secret. I have fooled you all along.
The king of the giants said that he had disguised himself as the giant Skrymir, the one who had guided Thor and his fellows through Jotunheim. And, had he not had used magic at that moment, he would have been dead. After all, when Thor tried to hit his head with his hammer, the god hit a mountain instead, turning the hill into a valley.
Dear Loki, you also have been deceived by an illusion. Actually, you were competing against a fire, and that fire engulfs everything in its path. You, Thjalfi, you competed against a thought, and even though you are extremely fast, nothing is faster than a thought. And what sort of tricks did you use against me in your palace? Said Thor, demanding an explanation. Now that we no longer have an audience, I can praise you for your strength and determination. The giant explained that the horn grabbed by Thor was connected to the ocean, so Thor was able to bring the sea level down a few meters, which was an incredible feat. As for the cat, he was actually lifting Jormungand, the world's serpent, and the mere fact that Thor could raise part of the snake off the ground was a huge accomplishment. Nevertheless, what stunned the giant the most was that Thor almost defeated the old woman, who was oldness itself, and time beats everyone down the road. Thor despised being tricked, and he would have crushed the giant, but he relied on his magic to vanish, along with his castle, for he feared the god's vengeance. The gods returned to Asgard. Thor knew that beating oldness or drinking all the water from the ocean was impossible, but defeating the world's snake was something he deemed feasible. And because of that, Thor started to wish to cross paths with Jormungand again, just to have the opportunity to beat it.
The prophecy said that Fenrir, Loki's wolf son, would be a great threat to the god Aesir. Based on that, the Asgardian gods put him under constant surveillance. The wolf grew, day after day, a source of concern for the Asgardians, except Tyr, who befriended Fenrir. They concluded that the animal had to be imprisoned. The Asgard deities forged powerful chains in an attempt to imprison Fenrir, and to hide their real intentions, the gods presented a challenge to the wolf. Fenrir, although immense and evil-natured, was still a cub and enjoyed playtime. The Asgardians challenged him to get rid of the god-made chains, and Fenrir liked that quest. The gods chained him, but those mighty chains failed to withstand the wolf. A new chain had to be made, and even more powerful than the first one, which was also placed on Fenrir. The wolf used his enormous strength, but the chain seemed strong enough to contain the colossal wolf. The gods looked at each other pleased, but they did not expect what took place immediately after. Fenrir used even more of his strength and ended up destroying the chains. The gods were bewildered by the wolf's sheer strength, and Fenrir noticed the Asgardian concern, a sign that they were up to something. No rope or chain managed to withstand the creature's strength, but Odin knew that if there was anyone of making such an object, these could only be the Doors. Odin ordered the elf Skirnir to go to the land of the Doors and asked them to make something that could imprison the wolf. The Doors agreed and sent the list of ingredients needed for such an object. These ingredients were quite unusual. For instance, mountain roots, bear tendons, a woman's beard, the breath of a fish, the saliva of a bird, and finally, the sound of a cat's footsteps. With all those ingredients gathered, the Doors started their work. The Asgardian gods were given a thin rope that looked as if it were made of silk, but the power contained in it did not match its appearance. Fenrir was yet again challenged to attempt to break these new harnesses, but the wolf was already suspicious, and upon seeing the rope that the gods were carrying in their hands, he thought that something mischievous was taking place. Odin assured the wolf that it was nothing but a simple joke. However, the wolf and Odin never got along. Being Loki's son, Fenrir could smell the lie in Odin's breath. The wolf said he would only engage in that game if any of the gods had the courage to put his hands inside the wolf's mouth while he was being tied up. If he sensed an attempt to deceive him, he would devour the god's hand right away. The gods looked at each other, and this only raised the wolf's suspicions. But Tyr, the god who always fed Fenrir, with whom he had established some kind of friendship, offered himself to put his hand inside the wolf's mouth. Then Fenrir agreed to be tied again. The wolf struggled against these new straps, but his full power could not break the dwarf-made mighty rope. Fenrir noticed the god's satisfaction and looked at Tyr, who was the only one who did not look happy. The wolf realized that he had been betrayed by the gods and even by his only friend. Fenrir clenched his jaw strongly, tearing Tyr's hand off. The god withstood the pain without a single cry. The brave Tyr was celebrated for his sacrifice. Fenrir had been firmly tied to a stone. The Asgardian gods were finally relieved to have neutralized such a threat. The wolf shrieked angrily, insulting the gods, saying that he might have become friends with the gods, but because of such betrayal, they would now be his greatest enemies. Fenrir swore to look for Odin on the battlefield during Ragnarok to have his revenge.
Balder was a son of Odin and Frigga, the supreme gods of Asgard. The god was beautiful, kind, and charismatic, and so he was loved by all. Balder spread happiness wherever he went, uplifting the days of the gods and of those who were with him. But with night's arrival, Balder's happiness diminished while he was sleeping. His sleep was consumed by nightmares. His beloved wife Nanna comforted him whenever he woke up startled. No god knew the meaning of such nightmares. The wise Odin knew that there was an oracle who could decipher these nightmares, and he was in the kingdom of Hell, where the souls of those undignified in the battlefield would go to perish. Odin, disguised as a wanderer, went to the kingdom of the dead. After using the runes, the oracle uttered the following answer:
Helheim is preparing itself to receive Balder, while the sadness takes over Asgard. Here in the realm of Hell, joy will be absolute with the arrival of the kind Balder's spirit.
Saddened by that, Odin returned to Asgard and told Frigga the gloomy fate of his beloved son. Frigga was decided to avoid the consummation of Balder's fate. Knowing that Balder was loved by everyone and everything, the goddess forced every single one to swear that they would never hurt Balder. Therefore, nothing could ever harm Balder. Even objects, plants, diseases, and weapons committed not to hurt Balder. Loki, the god of mischief, was deeply jealous of Balder, but even he decided to join the oath. And so Balder became invulnerable to everything, and nothing could harm him. The god was safe. Balder's invulnerability actually amused the gods. They would throw objects against Balder, but everything was dodged. Thor hit him with his mighty hammer, but Balder felt nothing. And so everyone in Asgard was happy to know that the beloved god was protected. All but Loki, who was determined to find a vulnerability in Balder. Disguised as one of the friends of the goddess Frigga, he found a way to make the goddess reveal what she had done. The goddess said to her false friend that she had forced everything to join the oath, except the mistletoe, which was a completely harmless plant. But inside the mind of someone evil like Loki, the mistletoe was not that harmless. After grabbing some mistletoe, he joined the gods again, who were still trying to attack Balder. Hodr, the blind god, was the only one dismayed since he could not join the prank. After all, he would never hit Balder without knowing his position. The elusive Loki created a dart made of mistletoe and approached Hodr, saying that his blindness would not stop him from joining the prank, and offered to help him. Loki was now invisible and guided Hodr to the place where the others were. Balder was happy to know that Hodr could now join the prank. Aided by Loki, he threw the mistletoe dart against Balder with full strength. Hodr hoped to hear the gods' laughter, but an immense silence flooded the place. Balder had been mortally wounded. When the god's body hit the ground, the gods desperately lamented his death. And, like the prophecy, the world of the living was consumed by sorrow with the departure of the beautiful and beloved Balder.
Loki, the god of cheating, was filled with evilness, and he seemed to no longer wish to hold such wickedness inside of him. Then he plotted Balder's death, the most beloved of the gods. The gods sent Hermithor, the messenger of the gods, to the kingdom of Hel, the world of the dead, in an attempt to bring his brother Balder back to the kingdom of Asgard. Hermithor was welcomed with the good news that Hel was willing to return Balder to the realm of the Aesirian gods. As long as every being lamented the god's death and desired Balder's return, the gods were happy with that news, since Balder was loved by all. Therefore, all beings were summoned to confirm their desire to have the dear god back. They all underlined their yearningness to see Balder again, but the gods learned that a giantess who lived in the mountains did not. And, because of her, Balder could not return, much to the demise of the gods. But the gods did not take long to find out that, actually, the heartless giantess was Loki in disguise. Loki had already perpetrated all sorts of wrongdoings, but he had exceeded the limits of the gods' patience. The Asgardians agreed that Loki would have to be punished. Loki dodged the wrath of the gods and found himself a hidden spot in the mountains near a salmon-filled well. Loki assumed the shape of a salmon and mixed himself with the fish, not to be found by the gods. Odin, the father of all, could see the whole world from the height of his throne, and he would soon discover Loki's hiding place. The cheating god knew that the gods would eventually find his hiding spot, pondering how they would try to capture him. The bait and hook hypothesis was underestimating the intelligence of the gods. Loki contemplated and found that a mash of strings could capture a fish. Loki created that instrument, the first fishing net that ever existed. After understanding how it worked, he conceived strategies to escape from it. When Loki saw the gods coming towards him, he threw the net into the fire and jumped again into the pit. The gods saw Loki jumping into the river, but had no idea about how to capture him. Kvasir found the remainder of the net that did not burn completely and realized the purpose of that Loki's. The gods created more and more nets and used them in an attempt to capture the cheater. Loki tried to dodge in every way possible the different nets conceived by the gods, and sometimes he jumped out of the water. Thor thought if a bear could get a salmon during its jump, he would as well. Then, when the fish-shaped Loki jumped once more, Thor was ready to catch him. Loki was captured by Thor and later dragged by the gods to a cave. There, he was bound and trapped. The guts and tendons of his own son were used to tie the cheating god. The gods wanted to kill the Lokis because of what he had done with Balder, but Loki had a blood pact with Odin, under which, despite their distinct origins, they were like brothers, and so Odin would not allow Loki's death. but imprisoning him would be quite a lenient punishment for such a traitor. Therefore, Skathi brought a snake with toxic saliva and put it in a stalactite on Loki's head. When the snake salivated, its venom fell on the traitor, thus burning his skin and inflicting enormous pain. Loki's wife was Sigyn, who stayed beside her husband while he endured his punishment. The loyal Sigyn tried to ease Loki's torment by using the bowl to collect the venom from the snakes. As time passed, the bowl got full, and Sigyn had to walk away to empty the bowl. As she did that, the venom fell once more into Loki's skin, screaming in pain and insulting his wife. The dedicated wife would return as quickly as possible to her spot, where she attempted to ease her husband's suffering. Every drop of poison that fell on Loki only increased his thirst for revenge. The god swore to have his payback during Ragnarok against the Aesirian gods for all the suffering that he was subjected to. Midgard was the land of the descendants of Ask and Embla, the first pair of humans created by the gods. Mankind survived with the protection of the gods, who had always shielded them from the forces of chaos. Thor, the terminator of giants, prevented the land of men from being taken over by the Jotnar. Under the gods' protection, mankind thrived without ever forgetting to pay the proper sacrifices to the gods. These men were used to dealing with the strictness of winter and were always preparing themselves to counteract all the difficulties that a long, icy winter could subject them to. But even these men knew that the reign of the gods would not be eternal, and that the Asgardian deities would have to face the forces of evil during Ragnarok. In Midgard, the land of men, the summer was ending. It all pointed to a great harvest ahead. But a cold wind blew, and unexpected frosts devastated a great share of the crops. The tree leaves quickly acquired autumn colors and fell way before the expected period, a sign that a harsh winter was approaching. Even with their crops ruined, men tried to prepare themselves as much as they could for the impending winter. But despite that determination, they could not be ready to face the approaching nightmare. Fimbulvitr had arrived, and with it the long winter. 3 winters would follow without any summer in between. Men and their livestock found shelter from the intense cold in their coats, in an attempt to survive without perishing before the freezing cold. The nights appeared to be longer. Every night, men feared that the sun would never rise again. Their food supplies would end, and due to hunger, they were forced to all eat egg-producing chickens and even their pets. Those who attempted to hunt an animal in the cold became easy prey for the packs of Fenrir's offspring. Men began to fight between themselves for scarce resources. Brother fought brother. Children challenged their parents. Chaos settled among men. The war axes were always drenched in blood. In Asgard, the Aesirian gods watched the signs that pointed to the ultimate quarrel between the gods and the forces of chaos. This cataclysmic event will be known as Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. After 3 virtually never-ending winters, chaos settled into the realm of men. Few managed to escape alive from the bloody anarchy that followed. The prophesied conditions for the beginning of Ragnarok had been established. 2 wolves, who claimed to be Fenrir's offspring, crossed the skies, going after the sun and moon. Hades chased the moon, and Skoll pursued the sun. The deities who embodied the 2 celestial bodies' time managed to escape the wolves for a long time, but they would not dodge Fenrir's offspring forever. That was when the wolves finally reached their prey and swallowed them. Without sun nor moon, the world fell into darkness. The end was near. Major earthquakes made by Yggdrasil, the tree of the world, trembled. The great crack and the mountains collapsed. The rock on which the mighty Fenrir wolf was bound had been shattered. The colossal wolf was finally free, and he sought revenge. Jormungand, the serpent of the world, convulsed in the waters, causing massive waves. These tsunamis leveled the few surviving coastal cities. The colossal serpent released its terrible poison, contaminating the waters. From the smallest living creatures, like the planktons, to the largest whales, they all perished intoxicated by the terrible snake. Loki, imprisoned and subjected to a dreadful torment, had his moorings broke. Like his son Fenrir, Loki only had one desire in his heart, the destruction of the Asgardian gods. The god of lies walked down to Helheim, the kingdom where the souls of those who had an unworthy death ended up. There, his daughter Hel reigned sovereign. The queen of the dead realm handed to her father the command of an army of the undead. This army included the corpses of those who had experienced a shameful death. These Nordic zombies wanted to reach the sort of glory they failed to attain when they were alive. Nidthugr, the dragon that gnaws the roots of the Tree of the Worlds, dug a great tunnel through which the armies of the dead would march to the land of men. Massive flames signaled that the army of Muspelheim was marching on. The giants of the Flaming Lands were led by Surtur, the Black. The colossal giant burned everything in his path with his flaming sword. The Jotunheimer ice giants jumped on giant ships made with human nails and sailed towards Vigridr, the place chosen as the battleground between the gods and the forces of chaos. The doubts of Heimdall, the guardian of the gods, had been dissipated, for Ragnarok had begun. The god finally blew the Gjallarhorn, and his sound could be heard throughout the universe. This was the warning everyone dreaded. The end of the era of the Aesirian gods was approaching. The great battle would begin. Heimdall's ringing horn announced that the day of the final battle had finally arrived. The forces of chaos, commanded by Loki, were eager to put an end to the reign of the Aesir gods, ready to use every available means to achieve such a goal. The Asgardian gods knew that the great battle was inevitable, and they had prepared themselves for the great day for thousands of years. The gates of Valhalla were opened, and thousands of warriors stepped out of the great hall and formed Odin's great army. This army comprised the bravest warriors who, while they were alive, died fighting bravely in the battlefields. They were taken by the Valkyries to the Hall of Valhalla, where they waited to again display all their courage while fighting alongside the gods during the Ragnarok. All the gods capable of wielding a weapon joined the fighters. The massive army of the Muspelheim giants tried to shatter the Asgardian gates. The Bifrost Bridge collapsed in the process, and part of the great army fell into the waters. The Asgardians cherished as the giants drowned in the river waters, but the gods knew that their destiny was not to hide behind the powerful walls constructed by the giant builder. Their destiny was to honorably face the forces of darkness in the open field. So Odin, on his glorious 8-legged horse, ordered the attack. The army of the gods advanced against their enemies. When their enemies clashed, the impact was so immense that it made Yggdrasil, the Tree of the Worlds, tremble. Thor, the champion of the gods, wanted to smash the heads of thousands of giants and was killing his enemies by the hundreds. The ice giants were led by Hyrm during the final battle, fighting Odin's ranks with great courage. Loki guided Hel's armies of living dead, composed of the dead who had experienced an unworthy death. Frey, the Vanir god, fought bravely on his golden boar next to the Asgardians. The valiant god attacked Surtur, the mighty leader of the Muspelheim fire giants. Frey did his very best, but that was not enough to defeat Surtur, who killed the Vanir god with his flaming sword. Before his death, Frey regretted having given his magic sword to Skirmir, since everything could have ended differently if he had had it in his hands. Frey was the first god to crumble on the battlefield, and many others would follow him. Tyr, the warrior god who sacrificed his hand for the gods in order to trap the wolf Fenrir, also fell after facing Garm, the powerful wolf of Hel, who defended the world of the dead. However, before his death, Tyr still managed to stick his sword into the hellish beast's heart. The battlefield was shaken when Jormungandr, the serpent of the world, appeared ready to fight. the creature unleashed a mist of venomous gases that killed the warriors of the gods. After encountering the serpent, Thor felt an immense impetus because he had been waiting for the decisive battle between him and his old rival. The fight between Thor and Jormungandr was nothing short of epic. The gigantic serpent attempted to swallow the Asgardian hero as the latter dodged his strikes and counterattacked with powerful hammer blows. The god of thunder managed to hit Jormungandr, forcing it to plunge into the ground, wounded. Thor unleashed a deadly blow to the serpent's head. The Asgardian gods and warriors cherished their champion's victory. Nevertheless, Thor's strike was so strong that it shattered Jormungandr's poisoned pockets, spreading a venomous cloud around Thor. Thor dropped on his knees and fell dead, poisoned. Without his ultimate champion, the battle against the forces of chaos became even more difficult for the gods. Fenrir, the giant wolf and son of Loki, devoured all those who opposed him, but he wanted to find Odin, his mortal enemy. The supreme god of Asgard knew that his destiny was to fight the terrifying wolf, Loki's son, and he did not run away from that opportunity. Odin spurred Sleipnir and advanced against Fenrir. But Odin's destiny was not to get out of this clash alive. Fenrir opened his massive mouth and devoured the father of all. The gigantic wolf mocked the gods after his victory against Aesir's wisest. That vexation filled Vidar's heart with hate, Odin's son. His fury gave him massive strength. Vidar attacked Fenrir, and the latter tried to bite him, but Vidar stuck his feet into the wolf's tongue and, with his strong arms, pushed his teeth away. The strength he put in was so colossal that he tore Fenrir's jaw in half. The gigantic wolf was dead. Even with his son's death, Loki felt satisfied with the carnage while watching the fall of the gods, one after the other. Heimdall, the guardian of the Rainbow Ridge, advanced between the army of the dead of Hel, making his way to Loki. Heimdall and Loki dueled, and the plasticity of the quarrel made it look like a deadly dance. Loki and Heimdall hit each other several times. The duel did not have a winner, and both died. The giant Surtur burned the world with his sword. The flames took over everything. There were no fighters on the side of the living, nor on the side of the dead. Only ashes remained. The flames reached Asgard, and the palaces were consumed by rivers of fire. The water level of the oceans rose to form a major flood. There was nothing else on Earth. The age of the Aesir gods was over. The waters that swept the earth receded, and in the earth that emerged after the flood, plants started to blossom again. A new sun emerged and put an end to the darkness that had taken over the earth. The Yggdrasil tree did not withstand the damage during the Ragnarok and fell, but inside the great ash tree, a secret surprise was concealed. The gods had hidden a couple of mortal beings so that the human race could resist the events of Ragnarok. The world would be repopulated again thanks to the love of this couple. The Asgardian kingdom had disappeared, but a new kingdom called Ithvalor would take its place. 6 gods took their seats in Ithvalor, the sons of Odin. Vidar, who killed Fenrir, and his brother Vali were there. The sons of Thor, Magni, and Mothi carried the god of thunder's hammer, standing for this new kingdom. Balder, the most beloved of the gods, emerged from the world of the dead, who together with Hother rose to take the last seats. There, they remembered the old traditions and discussed the future, trying not to repeat the mistakes of the past. The gods found the golden chess pieces used in the gods' games, and just like their parents, they began a new round of the ancestral game. A new cycle was beginning.